Welcome back to Haunt Narratives. It's October 29th, 2024, just 2 days before Halloween.
Ooh.
And tonight,
Oot.
we're going deep into the chilling story of the Bell Witch.
Okay.
You know, that tale that's seeped into our culture and sent shivers down spines for generations.
Yeah.
Well, get ready for a deep dive into its darkest corners.
There's something about this story that goes beyond your typical ghost story. The Bell Witch isn't just some wispy apparition. She's a force of malevolence.
Right.
That actively torments, even physically assaults her victims. That darkness, that palpable sense of dread is what makes it so compelling.
It's like stepping into a nightmare. You can't wake up. So for anyone who might need a refresher, let's set the stage.
Okay.
The Bell family haunting unfolded in the early 19th century Tennessee. This entity, this witch, as she came to be known, terrorized them for years.
Wow.
We're talking physical attacks, chilling threats, even whispers of poisonings.
And what's particularly disturbing is how specific and personal the torment became. Betsy Bell, the youngest daughter, and her father, John Bell Sr., seem to have been the primary targets of the witch's rage. Some accounts even claim John Bell Sr.'s life was ultimately taken by this malevolent force.
That's where the true horror lies. It's not just a haunting. It's a targeted campaign of terror. And what makes it even more unsettling is the possible link to a real person. Many believe the witch was called Kate, possibly connected to a woman named Old Kate Batts, a neighbor the Bells had a dispute with.
Yes, that kernel of human conflict that so often lies at the heart of these stories. A grudge, a betrayal, something that fuels the supernatural fire. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are born from human emotions.
Okay, so to understand how this legend took root and grew into the nightmare we know today, let's go back to the very beginning. One of the earliest documented mentions comes from an 1820 journal entry by a man named John R. Bell, no relation to the haunted family, but a fascinating account nonetheless. He describes hearing a disembodied voice that followed a young woman, relentlessly urging her to marry a local man.
Imagine that. A voice from thin air, dictating your life, controlling your destiny. Thousands supposedly flocked to hear this voice, to try and decipher if it was a genuine supernatural phenomenon or some elaborate hoax.
That idea of a hoax, of someone deliberately manipulating events, surfaces again and again throughout the Bell Witch story. In the 1850s, articles in both the New England Farmer and the Green Mountain Freeman put forward a startling theory.
Okay.
Betsy Bell, they suggested, might have been a skilled ventriloquist, orchestrating the haunting herself.
And their proposed motive: to coerce her sweetheart, Joshua Gardner, into marriage. It's a fascinating theory, isn't it? Did a young woman, driven by desperation or desire, fabricate one of the most enduring hauntings in American history?
It's like something straight out of a Gothic novel. But even if Betsy Bell wasn't the source of the haunting, the legend of the Bell Witch continued to cast a long and terrifying shadow over the community.
Yeah.
In 1868, during a murder trial, the victim claimed to possess powers associated with the Bell Witch.
Now, this detail is particularly revealing. It shows just how deeply the legend had permeated the collective consciousness.
Right.
It became a way to explain the unexplainable, a lens through which even violent crimes were interpreted. Imagine the fear, the paranoia that must have gripped the community, knowing this malevolent entity was still lurking in the shadows.
It's a chilling thought. And speaking of chilling, just a few years later, in 1880, there was what's come to be known as the haunted house incident in Springfield, Tennessee.
Okay.
It involved a family plagued by unexplained noises, objects moving on their own, even reports of a shadowy figure lurking in the house.
What's so interesting about this incident is how people immediately drew parallels to the Bell Witch, even though the events themselves were quite different. It demonstrates how a legend of this magnitude can shape perceptions, color people's understanding of the unknown.
The Bell Witch became the default explanation for anything strange or terrifying. And to truly grasp how the story solidified into the legend we know today, we need to turn to Goodspeed's History of Tennessee, published in 1886.
What's striking about Goodspeed's account is its conciseness, its matter-of-fact tone. He presents a condensed version of the Bell Witch story, almost as if reciting a historical event. And what really jumps out is his assertion that belief in the witch was practically universal at the time.
So by this point, the Bell Witch wasn't just a local legend. It was an accepted truth, woven into the fabric of Tennessee history. And to further cement this belief, a series of strange and unsettling events occurred in Adams Station in 1890. These incidents took place just after the death of Joel Egbert Bell, the last surviving child of John and Lucy Bell.
Imagine the whispers, the fear that must have spread through the community. Was it coincidence? Or had the witch returned to claim another victim?
The timing was certainly eerie. At Reverend Quite's home, Cole inexplicably fell from the ceiling, injuring his wife. Then there were the two women, who vanished without a trace from the Holloway home.
Wow.
And a man named Joe Johnson swore he heard a disembodied voice, warning him not to touch a sack of corn.
Oh.
That had seemingly moved on its own.
It's as if the very air was charged with dread, the community on edge, bracing for the next terrifying chapter in the Bell Witch saga.
Now, buckle up, because here's where things get even more intriguing.
Okay.
A man named Martin Van Buren Ingram enters the picture.
Okay.
Ingram was a newspaperman and author who, in 1894, published the first full-length book dedicated to the Bell Witch, an authenticated history of the famous Bell Witch.
Ingram's book is a pivotal piece of the puzzle. He claimed to base his account on first-hand stories and a manuscript from Richard Williams Bell, one of John Bell Sr.'s sons. This manuscript, he claimed, provided intimate details about the haunting, offering an unprecedented glimpse into the family's torment.
But there's a catch.
Uh-oh.
And it's a big one.
Indeed. To this day, that manuscript, along with many of Ingram's other sources, has never been found. This raises significant questions about his reliability, about whether he embellished, sensationalized, or even outright fabricated parts of the story.
So, we're left with a chilling possibility. Did Ingram, driven by ambition, or a desire to capitalize on the public's fascination with the macabre, warp the Bell Witch story into something darker, more terrifying than reality? It's a question we'll explore further when we return.
Welcome back to Haunt Narratives. Before we ventured deeper into the darkness, we were discussing Martin Van Buren Ingram and the potentially troubling aspects of his book on the Bell Witch. He claimed to have access to sources no one has ever seen, which makes you wonder about his motivations, doesn't it?
It definitely raises a red flag for me. Was he genuinely trying to document a historical event? Or was he weaving a tale designed to tap into our primal fears? And, one of the most glaring examples of Ingram's possible embellishment involves none other than Andrew Jackson.
Yes. The infamous Andrew Jackson encounter, Ingram paints a vivid scene. Jackson, a military hero and future president, drawn to the Bell Witch legend, brings his men to investigate. Picture it. A rugged wagon train rolling through the Tennessee backwoods, their destination. A farmhouse gripped by an unseen terror.
It's like something straight out of a horror movie. Ingram describes Jackson's wagon suddenly grinding to a halt, held fast by an unseen force. The men panic, their horses rear in fear. And then Jackson, the fearless general, utters the chilling words, "By the eternal boys, it is the witch."
And as if on cue, a metallic voice rings out, mocking, challenging, allowing the wagon to proceed, but promising to see you again tonight. The scene is pure nightmare fuel, a clash between the rational world and the forces of darkness.
It's an incredible story. But here's where the skepticism kicks in. Historians have meticulously combed through Jackson's life, his letters, his military records, and there's absolutely no evidence to support this encounter ever happening. Jackson's movements during that period are well documented, and there's no mention of the bells, no whispers of the detour to confront a malevolent entity.
And you'd think if a presidential candidate had been publicly humiliated by a witch, his political opponents would have seized on that, wouldn't they? It seems highly unlikely that such an event, especially one involving a figure as prominent as Andrew Jackson, would have simply vanished from the historical record.
So are we to believe that Ingram fabricated this entire encounter? It's possible. But there's another, perhaps even more unsettling interpretation. What if Ingram's book, even with its potential inaccuracies and embellishments, reflect the cultural anxieties of his time?
The late 19th century was a period of profound change and uncertainty. The Industrial Revolution was reshaping society. Traditional values were being challenged, and there was a growing sense of unease about the future. In times like these, people often turn to the supernatural, to stories of darkness and the unknown, as a way to process their fears.
So the Bell Witch, in a way, becomes the symbol of those unspoken anxieties. She embodies the fear of the unseen, the uncontrollable, the forces that threaten to disrupt our lives.
Exactly. And Ingram's book, whether entirely factual or not, taps into those primal fears, amplifying them, weaving them into a narrative that both terrifies and captivates its audience.
It's a brilliant, albeit unsettling marketing strategy. But Ingram's book is just one chapter in the Bell Witch saga. The legend continued to evolve, to morph and twist throughout the 20th century, taking on new forms, finding new ways to terrify and enthrall.
And one of the most intriguing aspects of this evolution is the emergence of the Bell Witch Cave. While caves are mentioned in some of the early accounts, This specific cave, the one that's become a pilgrimage site for those seeking a brush with the supernatural, wasn't central to the original haunting.
It's almost as if the legend needed a physical space, a tangible location, to ground itself, to make the terror feel more real, more immediate. And with that physical space came a wave of new stories, new encounters, each adding another layer of darkness to the Bell Witch mythos.
Let's delve into some of those encounters, shall we? One that stands out is from Charles Bailey Bell's 1934 book, The Bell Witch. A mysterious spirit, Charles Bailey Bell was a grandson of John Bell Jr., and he claimed to have collected stories passed down through the family whispers of the witch's enduring presence.
And what's especially chilling about his account is the inclusion of prophecies supposedly made by the witch back in 1828. These weren't vague predictions, they were specific, detailed pronouncements about the future. And one prophecy in particular sent chills down spines. The witch's vow to return in 1935.
Imagine the anticipation, the dread that must have gripped those who believed was the witch's return a certainty. Would she resume her reign of terror, targeting a new generation of the Bell family?
Thankfully, 1935 came and went without any major incidents. But that didn't stop the stories, the whispers from spreading. In fact, just 2 years later, in 1937, there was a surge of reports about strange and unsettling occurrences at the Bell Witch Cave and the surrounding area.
The stories range from unexplained noises echoing through the cave to sightings of a mysterious figure perched on a cliff overlooking the site. One particularly chilling incident involved Louis Garrison, the owner of the farm at the time. He claimed to have heard distinct sounds coming from inside the cave. Footsteps, whispers, a low guttural growl that sent shivers down his spine.
And according to descendants of the Bell family, there were reports of objects moving on their own inside the cave. Rocking chairs, swaying gently despite no one being near them. And faint music, like a ghostly piano, drifting through the air.
It's as if the legend itself was becoming more potent, more active, drawing people to the cave, feeding off their fear and fascination.
And as more people ventured into the cave, seeking thrills or perhaps a glimpse into the darkness, the stories grew more intense, more terrifying. In 1944, a woman named Bonnie Haimline, who had explored the cave as a child, had an experience that nearly cost her her life.
Bonnie was deep inside the cave when her lantern repeatedly went out, plunging her into darkness. She later learned that 2 escaped fugitives were hiding in the cave at the time. She was convinced the Bell Witch, perhaps sensing the danger, had extinguished her light, warning her of the threat.
A protective spirit. That's a twist I wasn't expecting. But then again, the Bell Witch is full of surprises.
Indeed. And speaking of surprises, in 1977, there was a report of soldiers from Fort Campbell visiting the cave. One of the soldiers, skeptical of the legend, dared to challenge the witch, provoking her, taunting her to reveal herself.
That's never a good idea when dealing with the supernatural.
You're absolutely right. According to the story, the soldier was suddenly grabbed by an unseen force, lifted off his feet, and thrown against the cave wall. He left the cave terrified, convinced that he had just had a very real, very painful encounter with the Bell Witch.
It seems even the military isn't immune to the witch's wrath. And just a few years later, in 1986, 2 journalists were given permission to spend the night in the Bell Witch Cave. They were hoping to debunk the legend, to prove that it was nothing more than superstition and overactive imaginations.
A brave, if foolish, endeavor.
They didn't last long. They described hearing a series of unsettling noises, groans, thumps, and even a high-pitched scream that seemed to pierce their very souls. They fled the cave before nightfall, their skepticism shattered, replaced by a primal fear they couldn't shake.
Fear is a powerful force, especially in a place so steeped in darkness and dread. And there's one final anecdote from this period that I find particularly chilling. It involves a man named H.C. Sanders and a talking rabbit.
A talking rabbit. Okay, you have my attention.
Sanders claimed that 20 years earlier he'd run out of gas near the Red River, just across from the Bell Witch Cave. As he walked towards town, a rabbit started following him. It kept pace with him, even when he ran.
Okay, that's a little creepy. But a talking rabbit, come on.
I know it sounds absurd, but hear me out. Sanders said that when he finally stopped to catch his breath, the rabbit hopped up on a log beside him and said, clear as day, hell of a race we had there, wasn't it?
Okay, that's both creepy and hilarious, but it also makes you wonder, was it a genuine encounter with the supernatural? A hallucination brought on by fear and exhaustion? Or was it just a tall tale? A way to add another layer of mystique to the Bell Witch legend.
That's the beauty and the terror of these stories, isn't it? They blur the lines between reality and nightmare, leaving us to grapple with the unknown.
It's all very unsettling. But amidst all these tales of hauntings and prophecies, we have to ask the question, is any of it real? Is the Bell Witch a genuine entity, a malevolent force that walks among us? Or is it all just a captivating, albeit terrifying fabrication?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to get to the heart of it, we need to look at both sides of the coin. The perspective of those who believe wholeheartedly, and the perspective of those who approach the legend with skepticism.
So we've journeyed through centuries of stories, each more unsettling than the last.
Yeah.
We've encountered disembodied voices, vengeful spirits, and even a talking rabbit. It's enough to make you sleep with the lights on. But before we get too lost in the shadows, I want to shift gears for a moment and get a little more philosophical. Why does this story, out of all the countless ghost stories and legends, resonate so deeply with us? What is it about the Bell Witch that continues to grip our imaginations and send chills down our spines?
It's a question that's haunted me for years. I think at its core, the Bell Witch story taps into something primal, a fear that's woven into our very DNA. This isn't just a ghost who rattles chains or moans in the night. The Bell Witch is an embodiment of pure malevolence, a force of darkness that actively seeks to harm, to torment, to destroy. That kind of relentless, focused evil is both terrifying and strangely alluring.
It's like staring into the abyss and feeling the abyss stare back at you. We're fascinated by the dark side of human nature, by the capacity for cruelty and violence. And the Bell Witch, in all her terrifying glory, reflects that darkness back at us.
There's also the element of mystery, the unanswered questions that linger long after the story is told. Is the witch connected to a real person, like old Kate Batts? Is she a vengeful spirit tied to the land itself? Or something else entirely, something beyond our comprehension? The lack of a definitive answer, the ambiguity that shrouds her origins, only adds to the story's power.
It allows us to fill in the blanks with our own fears and interpretations. We project our anxieties onto the legend, making it even more personal, more unsettling.
And we can't discount the historical context. The Bell Witch story emerged during a time of immense social and political upheaval in the United States. The country was still reeling from the Revolutionary War, expanding westward, grappling with questions of identity and destiny. These anxieties, these uncertainties about the future, found an outlet in stories of the supernatural, in tales of darkness and the unknown.
So the Bell Witch, in a way, became a symbol of those unspoken fears, a manifestation of the chaos and uncertainty that gripped the nation.
Precisely. She embodies the fear of the unseen, the uncontrollable forces that threaten to disrupt our lives, overturn our sense of order. And what's remarkable is how the legend continues to evolve, to adapt to new anxieties, new fears.
Like the emergence of the Bell Witch Cave as a focal point, even though it wasn't central to the original story.
It's as if the legend itself is shape-shifting, finding new ways to hold our attention, to tap into our deepest fears. And that, I think, is the key to its enduring power. The Bell Witch story is a mirror reflecting our own anxieties, our own fascination with the dark side of human nature.
It's a chilling thought, but it also makes me wonder, as we approach Halloween, with the veil between worlds feeling a bit thinner, do you think there's any truth to the Bell Witch legend?
The question of truth is always a slippery one, especially when dealing with the paranormal. What we can say with certainty is that the Bell Witch story has had a profound and lasting impact on our culture. It's a testament to the power of belief, to the enduring human fascination with the unknown, the unexplainable, whether the witch is real or not. The fear and fascination she inspires are undeniable, and perhaps in the end, that's all that truly matters.
That's a chilling thought to leave us with. The fear, the fascination, those are real, and those are the emotions that keep us coming back to these stories, seeking answers, seeking thrills, seeking a glimpse into the darkness that lies just beyond our understanding.
Indeed. And as we wrap up our exploration of the Bell Witch, I can't help but think of all those who have ventured into her domain, those who have sought her out, challenged her, or simply hoped for a glimpse of the supernatural.
Well, to our listeners, as you prepare for your own Halloween festivities, remember the story of the Bell Witch. Let her tale serve as a reminder that even in the darkest corners of our world, amidst the shadows and whispers, there is a strange and unsettling beauty to be found. Happy Halloween, everyone, and sleep well, if you can.
Until next time, stay curious. Keep exploring the shadows. And remember, sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones that whisper to us of truths we'd rather not face.
Thanks for joining us for another spine-tingling episode of Haunt Narratives.
Yes.
Until next time, stay spooky.